Your Excellency, whilst we remain standing, permit me to invite the Provost of the All Saints Cathedral, the Very Reverend Canon Evalo, to lead us in our prayer.
Let us pray. In the name of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Dear God, we thank you for congregating us here, the presidential assent, which now turns into an act. We process in prayer, asking that this law may serve to scale up and accelerate the growth of our national infrastructure, and that it may open us up to mobilizing mega financing from diverse sources. Lord, it is our prayer that this fund will help us as a nation to do several things: to bring down our public debt, to restore our sovereignty as a nation, and enable us to undertake major infrastructural projects aimed at redefining our growth in the coming years. We pray that in your infinite wisdom, Lord, you may guide the process of constituting the governing council and the board and the general operationalization of this fund. May those who will be appointed here apply impeccable integrity in their work. We thank you, President William, and his courage and vision to do what many leaders would fear doing. That is, casting a clear vision and taking the risks associated with the realization of that vision. Bless his commitment to leading Kenya towards a first world nation. As he serves as the chief executive of this great country, may you bless him with good health, preserve his heart from being affected by what cynics say, and as the apostle, may you help our president to keep his head up in all situations and to serve the people of Kenya to your glory. This is your prayer in the most powerful and unchanging name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Your distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you may kindly take your seats. Your Excellency, the President, the leadership of Parliament as led by the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, and all Cabinet Secretaries present, representatives of our development partners, Chief Executive Officers of financial institutions present, Principal Secretaries present, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this historic presidential assent ceremony. Your Excellency, sir, this state ceremony is convened pursuant to Article 115 of the Constitution for the presidential assent to the National Infrastructure Fund Bill, National Assembly Bill number 1 of 2026. This legislation heralds a new chapter in mobilizing long-term capital to build the infrastructure backbone needed to propel Kenya to first world status within a generation. Today's ceremony, therefore, marks an important milestone in the intergenerational endeavor to establish a sustainable framework for financing of strategic national infrastructure. To set the stage for the presidential assent, it is my honor to invite the following state officials who will flank you on your left of the presidential ceremonial desk. The Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, the Cabinet Secretary for Environment and Climate Change, Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, the Principal Secretary for the National Treasury, and the Solicitor General. On the right, we'll have have the parliamentary leadership led by the Speaker, Majority Leader, Chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning, the Majority Whips, Deputy Majority Whip, Your Excellency, sir, the objective of the bill is to establish a National Infrastructure Fund, the private capital, additional sources of infrastructure, investments fund, collective investment schemes, and client institutional framework expected to result in commercial while national nation of large complex. This landmark legislation further defines national infrastructure eligible for support under the fund to include projects such as national highways, railway networks, airports, seaports, and electricity generations, transmission and distribution infrastructure, among others. As part of the nation's accountability framework and in keeping with the global best practices, the fund will be governed through a two-tier governance structure. The fund will draw its resources from proceeds of privatization, proceeds from the sale of shares in government-linked corporations, and returns generated from investments undertaken by the fund itself. This legislation, therefore, represents a significant step in addressing the constraints in physical space while creating a sustainable institutional mechanism for financing Kenya's long-term infrastructure needs. Sir, with the National Assembly having its constitutional making mandate in enacting legislation, it is now to petition Your Excellency as a government to exercise the authority under Article 150 and send the National Infrastructure Bill 2026 into law. Sir, with your kind permission, I now the vellum piece of the bill, duration and the clerk.
Actions speak of the National Assembly. Placed before you is the National Infrastructure Fund for your assent. This is the National Assembly, the leader of the majority, Chongwa, is Infrastructure Fund. Excellent period of the government-owned enterprise bill, which is now an act of parliament. And thereafter, during the public participation process of the consideration of session of paper number 3 of 2025 on the partial divestiture of the government shareholding in Safaricom PLC, it became apparent that there is need to provide a comprehensive framework for purposes of anchoring appropriately the National Infrastructure Fund. Your Excellency, this bill, therefore, is a product of public participation, expert views, and views from both public and private sector, and views collected from across Kenya during the public participation process of the consideration of session of paper number 3 of 2025. This bill, Your Excellency, is also a product of the ingenuity of the 13th Parliament to pick views of the public, views of the experts, to come up with a product that will anchor the National Infrastructure Fund. Your Excellency, this bill provides for the establishment of the National Infrastructure Fund, and it is intended to mobilize private capital for non-traditional sources of infrastructure finance. It's also intended to reduce the over-reliance on public debt and taxation to finance capital and complex infrastructure projects. The bill, Your Excellency, in one of the clauses defines what is to be funded, including national highways, expressways, railways, seaports, and airports as those that can be funded within the confines of the infrastructure fund. The bill, Your Excellency, creates two entities, that is a council and a board, both with distinct functions in order to ensure that this fund works well. Your Excellency, the bill also gives powers to the National Assembly as required under Article 95 of the Constitution to oversight the execution of the fund, including the approval of the investment policy. In passing this bill, Your Excellency, the National Assembly also created offenses so that those who misappropriate funds under this fund will not find it easy. Your Excellency, in passing this bill, it was the view of the National Assembly that the bill will not lead to any increase in taxation, but will actually do the opposite, because the intention of the House is to facilitate the government of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellency, to mobilize capital from non-traditional sources, to reduce reliance on taxation and borrowing as the main options of financing capital infrastructure projects. The bill, Your Excellency, has 49 clauses and shall come into operation upon publication. May I seek leave, Your Excellency, to end my commission for the day at this point. Thank you.
Your Excellency, in observance of the requirements that instrument issued by the head of state be executed under the hand and seal of the President, I invite Your Excellency to affix the seal of the Republic to the bills, thereby perfecting their enactment into law. With Your Excellency's assent, the National Infrastructure Bill now becomes law and is entered into the body of the laws of the Republic of Kenya. Through this enactment, the nation's journey towards first world status is firmly placed on course. Your Excellency, as we draw this ceremony to a close, may I most graciously invite you to present a signed copy of this act to the witnesses on your right, on your left, and thereafter your witness on the right. So, Your Excellency, you will unveil and display an open ceremonial copy of the acts, while other state officials shall bear closed copies. I thank you, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Kenya Defense Forces, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Moses Wetangula, Mr. Samaila Zabairu, President and CEO of Africa International Finance Corporation, Ms. Mary Porter, Regional Vice President for Africa International Finance Corporation, Mr. Admasu Tedese, Group President and Managing Director, Trade and Development Bank Group, Cabinet and Principal Secretaries present, all members of Parliament present, led by the Majority Leader, Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, stakeholders and captains of industries, and all guests invited. Your Excellency, to start us off on some brief comments, allow me to invite Honorable John Badi, who is the CS for Treasury, to make some introductory remarks. Why don't we welcome him with a warm clap? Karibu sana, Waziri.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, I am glad to be standing here today to present what I can term as my report form on the assignment handed over to me together with the Attorney General by the Cabinet on 15th of December 2025, having approved the establishment of National Infrastructure Fund in Kenya, and also approved the commencement of the necessary legal framework required for establishment and operationalization of the fund. My appreciation, Your Excellency, goes to the leadership of the National Assembly, and more particularly the Committee of Finance and Economic Planning, who efficiently managed this process and delivered the final bill in a record time. Your Excellency, some of the proposals in the National Infrastructure Bill 2025 are informed by lessons learned and best practices from other countries that have experienced significant infrastructure development by transitioning from traditional debt-heavy public spending to blended investment-led financing models. We studied successful models from jurisdictions including India, Singapore, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Nigeria, Germany, and Canada, among others. Your Excellency, it's also worth noting or saying that signing of the National Infrastructure Act into law is the wider delivery of the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto as approved by Kenyans in the last election, and this was a promise which was in black and white in that manifesto. And Your Excellency, allow me to blow my own trumpet and affirm that I am a fast learner in this regard, and I can ably explain that manifesto even though I was not part of it at the time. But Your Excellency, it is also worth noting that even as Azimio coalition, where I belonged then, and Azimio is not there anymore, but where I belonged then and sat in the Economic Council, we also had a similar arrangement where we had also proposed that we would set up a fund to deal with infrastructure development, even though we didn't call it a bank as your own manifesto did. So all Kenyans were in agreement that we were facing constrained fiscal space, yet we still needed a huge and massive investment in infrastructure. And therefore, we had to think outside the box and come up with the innovative ways of financing our infrastructure projects. Your Excellency, allow me to speak to the macroeconomic context informing this proposal. Kenya's fiscal position places real constraints on policy choices. Public debt stands at approximately around 67% to date of GDP, while debt service obligations consume more than half of ordinary revenue. As a matter of fact, our projection for 26-27 is that 48.7% of our ordinary revenue will go into debt service costs. That is almost 50%. And there was a year we had already crossed the 50% mark. So, Your Excellency, it's evident that we don't have more space, especially in debts, and we don't have space also in our increased taxation. Hence, the necessity to come up with these innovative and creative ways of financing commercially viable infrastructure projects. At the same time, Kenya's tax to GDP ratio remains in the mid-teens, reflecting both economic structure and the social and political limits of taxation. Global financial conditions have also tightened, making borrowing more expensive and less predictable. Yet demands on government have not diminished. Infrastructure gaps remain a binding constraint to growth, while social sectors require sustained investments, like education. Your Excellency, it would interest Kenyans to know that we are spending close to 27% of our expenditure, total expenditure, in supporting education in this country. Yet, you still hear complaints that we are not supporting education enough. We are spending so much money in supporting health programs, including primary health care, which is funded 100% by the national government. Yet still, you still hear concerns that we should put or allocate more resources in healthcare. We are spending so much money in social interventions to our elderly, those who are vulnerable in different ways, and yet still you hear that we need to spend money on these social interventions. And therefore, Your Excellency, there is need to take out of our budget some of the commercially viable infrastructure projects. And this includes, and not limited to, the following. One is the airports and seaports. Two is our national highways, those which are commercially viable, and there are many, and we have identified them. Three, we also have energy sector, which needs more funding. We are currently generating just well over 3,000 megawatts, but we need over 10,000, Your Excellency. And lastly, I will also mention water and irrigation. For us to realize food security in this country, we must invest more in agriculture. We cannot continue to rely on rain-fed agriculture because of the unpredictable climatic conditions. And therefore, we have realized that there is an opportunity for us to put more resources in doing mega dams in this country to make water available for agriculture. We have fertile land, but what we are lacking is a reliable source of water for irrigation. I'll just give one example, Your Excellency. Galana Kulalu, which has been an experiment, and this administration has actualized. We have put 1,500 acres under irrigated agriculture, and each acre we have just harvested in the month of December. Each acre produces about between 30 and 35 bags of maize in one harvest, and we can do 2 harvests in a year. Now, that clearly demonstrates that you can harvest 60 bags from 1 acre each year. If you multiply by 200,000 acres that can be put under irrigated agriculture in Galana Kulali, you are likely to harvest 12 million bags. And this country, in the current arrangement, we have a shortfall of between 10 million and 12 million bags of maize, and 15 million bags of maize. Therefore, Galana Kulalu alone is able to fill the gap that we face as a country in terms of food security. That tells you that if we utilize this fund properly and target that sector, we are likely to be able to realize food sufficiency in this country and cut on forex demands when we import food to the country, and also address the concerns and the challenges that the population faces. This mismatch between expectations and fiscal capacity necessitates new approaches, as we are trying to do. Now, to conclude, Your Excellency, I submit that this act is about asset optimization. It asks whether public capital locked in mature enterprises is being deployed in the most productive way. I have heard cynics complain that we are divesting, that we are privatizing assets which are making profits. But they are not asking themselves whether we are optimizing the value of those assets. They need to wake up to the reality that mature assets can be optimized better, put to better use, that we can privatize these enterprises, raise resources, and invest in asset-producing, commercially viable public assets, which again would give us more economic value going forward than what we are realizing from those assets today. Holding equity preserves ownership, and that is a basic lesson in a finance classroom. But it may not delay a social return when the economy urgently requires infrastructure investment. And this administration has realized that. Hence, our move towards making sure that those assets that are mature can be optimized by privatizing them, by divesting from them, and creating seed capital in National Infrastructure Fund, which then would be used to de-risk our public infrastructure projects by blending our capital with the private sector. And that is what we call crowding in private sector to be able to realize economic progress. And that is the journey to Singapore. The journey to Singapore is not about some illusion and thinking that the whole of Kenya will move to Singapore. That country is too small for the 55 million Kenyans to go there. We are going there in terms of taking decisions, deliberate, to make sure that we move to the first world. There is nothing that would stop this country from moving to the first world. What you need is brave and courageous leadership, a leadership that is thinking, and a leadership that is not held back by old thinking, like I hear people say, that instead of creating this fund, why don't you go ahead and continue borrowing through infrastructure bond? Infrastructure bond, for practical purposes, is just but another terminology for borrowing. Therefore, Your Excellency, as I conclude, let me also assure the public that we have put in place good governance structure for these funds. We have two levels of management of this fund. But again, it is important to note that the board will be reporting to the cabinet secretary 4 times in a year, minimum. But again, the cabinet secretary will be reporting to the cabinet at least twice in a year. And again, we will be reporting to the National Assembly, which is the oversighting, the people's representatives, oversighting this fund at least once a year. And nothing stops National Assembly from inviting those who are managing this fund anytime, any day. They can even invite us to explain the operations of this fund 365 times in a year, which means every day we can go to the National Assembly and explain the operations of this fund. Allow me to end there, Your Excellency, because I was just supposed to give a summary of what this fund is all about, and stop it there and thank everyone who participated in making sure that today we are celebrating a new child in the Republic of Kenya. The National Infrastructure Fund has just been born. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Waziri. Your Excellency, next allow me to now invite Dr. Jose Akili, CEO, CPF, to come and make some brief remarks. And as he's coming, just an amendment, Mr. Samaila Zubairu is President and CEO, Africa Finance Corporation, and Ms. Mary Porter is Regional Vice President for International Finance Corporation. A clap for Bwana Kili as he's coming to make some brief remarks. Welcome, sir.
Your Excellency, sir, and your distinguished guests, I represent the pension industry as the chairman of the pension trustees and administrators of Kenya, and I'm also proud to have served as the convener of Committee of Experts appointed by the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury last year, where we convened ourselves as a private financial and capital partners, and we were able to do the work we were given by the Cabinet Secretary, and indeed handed over to the peers our report. In that document, Your Excellency, we recommended strongly that a fund be created by the government and a mirror image of the same fund be created by the private parties who are here, so that we can be able to plan the finance and be able to achieve national development. I want to say, Your Excellency, I would remind you that the first time when you became president at the NSC, Nairobi Securities Exchange, when you came as our guest, I did say, and loudly so, that we as an industry at that time, we were controlling 1.6 trillion pension industry. And I say that if given a chance that time, we would have financed the SGR. And we would also have financed the expressway. And I know it was baffling for you, but now I stand here to tell you that because of the initiatives you introduced, including the strengthening the NSSF, we have now managed to reach 2.81 trillion in assets in the pension industry. But in our Committee of Experts, we managed to aggregate ourselves to include insurance companies, the Islamic finance, SACCOs, and the banks, and the banking fraternity. And we are ready, sir, to continue that engagement, and we'll be asking for more collaboration and opportunities to engage and be able to do these things. We believe in this vision of bottom-up economic agenda, which you espouse, and I want to assure you that under your leadership, this fund, we will make it work. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Bwana Jose Akili, Dr. Jose Akili. Next, Your Excellency, from the insurance sector, allow me to invite Mr. Tom Gitogo, Group MD and CEO of Britam Holdings PLC. Why don't we give him a warm welcome as he approaches the stage. Welcome, sir.
Your Excellency the President, honorable and distinguished guests here this morning, and my colleagues from the industry. Your Excellency, this framework, as was said before, has worked very well in other jurisdictions. Most developed countries can trace back to some of their achievements to this arrangement. It is akin to investing in factors of production, which increases the productivity of our country and various communities, and also increases, therefore, the competitiveness of our country. The governance around this fund allows long-term funds such as pension schemes under the RBA, some of the collective investment schemes under CMA, and life insurance companies under the IRA to optimize some of the opportunities that this fund will bring. So this allows us to participate in the growth of our country, and it is this growth that will then widen the private sector and again enable us to invest some more. So we will collaborate, and I can't wait, Mr. President, to see my peers and colleagues in the industry take part in this fund. Congratulations, everyone, and good morning.
Thank you, sir. Next, we move to the banking sector. And Your Excellency, to start us off on that section, Mr. John Gashora, Group MD, NCBA. Give him a warm clap as he's coming as well. Karibu sana, Bwana Gashora.
Your Excellency, the President, distinguished guests, let me ride on the protocols already established. Let me start by saying congratulations, Mr. President. I think we owe you a clap. Some of us first heard about this fund, I believe, during your State of the Nation address in November. And, then you talked about it quite more during the Jamhuri Day celebrations. So it's good to see a journey of 5 trillion, as you called it, starts with a few billion. And here we are. But I must say, it actually starts with your signature, what you just did this morning. So congratulations, Your Excellency. I think the question a lot of the banks would ask is, when you talk about Kulalu, for example, Waziri, are those investable projects for the banks? And as I was reflecting about this, I just want to give you a quick story. In my previous life, I worked for a bank called Credit Suisse, and may it rest in peace, because they died, unfortunately. But one of our CEOs of the investment bank then, called Credit Suisse First Boston, was a man called Bayo Ogunlesi, and I'm sure my friend from Nigeria would know that name quite well. So when Bayo Ogunlesi left Credit Suisse, I was still there, he started a fund he called it Global Infrastructure Partners, LLC. And we all asked ourselves, isn't that the work of government? Your Excellency, today that fund owns most of the airports in the UK, owns a lot of railways, owns roads, and all kinds of other projects, and is now worth $200 billion, that same fund. And recently was bought by BlackRock. So what I'm trying to say is that there are serious investable projects that we banks would be more than happy to participate and work with the national government on. Having looked at the bill, I want to also thank the Parliament. I think they have done a fantastic job to address the key issues that we worry about, which is governance. I think your President, your government has put a lot of effort to make sure that the governance of this fund meets what we as a private sector would like to see. So really for me is to congratulate you, say that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. We have started it, and we'll walk this journey with you. Thank you very much.
Next, within the banking sector, Your Excellency, allow me to invite Mr. Paul Russo, CEO, KCB Group Limited. Karibu sana, Mr. Paul Russo. We can welcome him with a clap as well.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I will also stand on the protocols already established. Your Excellency, when I stand here, I kind of don't know whether I should represent the Kenya bankers or KCB, because I'm the chairman of Kenya Bankers. So let me represent both, Your Excellency. I think John has touched one of the key items that I wanted to mention, the governance structures, because banks will really look at the governance structure. So thank you again to your government, to Parliament, for making sure that this fund is correctly structured. We thank you. Your Excellency, on KCB, I think I just want to mention a few points, because if I miss this platform for KCB, I would have failed. On G2G, KCB issued LCs of 1.07 trillion, not a single shilling lost. If you bank, if we structure elements correctly, we will fund as banks, and will come through, Your Excellency. I think if you look at Lindsay Finco, the first securitized working with CPF and all other parties, Your Excellency, listing it at 44.7 billion to fund the stadium, Your Excellency. It's an amazing way to work together. Your Excellency, I also want to mention a number of bridging facilities. Honorable Chirchir is here to try and unlock NPLs. For a long time, banks were stuck with non-performing loans from construction companies. Securitization of the roads levy has unlocked the non-performing loans for banks, Your Excellency. I think I will also want to mention the famous subsidy, Your Excellency. When people, and I want to tease my governor for Central Bank, we say food inflation is down. Banks have been there for making sure that we have fertilizer at the right time under the government subsidy for fertilizer, Your Excellency. So we do make a lot of contribution as banks. Beyond the border, Your Excellency, KCB, led the transaction for Bugesera Airport in Rwanda. So when we struggle how to fund the airport, Your Excellency, invite banks. We will work together with this fund to be able to sort out our infrastructure. Just across Ethiopia, we probably have an exposure of $1.35 billion US on trade. Not a single shilling ever lost. So we power the region, Your Excellency. When I come back to banking, it's very important, Your Excellency, that the private sector is involved. We want to participate. We request your government to continue inviting us to the table. We've seen that, coming through. We as a banking sector are willing to fund commercially viable projects, and we will definitely show up. Finally, Your Excellency, on the infrastructure fund, as we congratulate yourself, we assure you that we will bring our own expertise to the table as banking sector to find ways to work together. And I want to mention a few partners that are on this table. Afri-Exim, Your Excellency, we work together to provide solution. TDB, work together to provide solution as banking sector. IFC, big time, work together. AFC is on the table, Your Excellency. So we've got partners. We are local. We understand the local market. We have capabilities to bring those partners onto the table and take risks together. If local banks take a step forward, other partners will come to the table because we can put our skin in the game. I thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Mr. Paul Russo. Next, Your Excellency, we'll hear from Mr. Samaila Zubairu, President and CEO, Africa Finance Corporation. A clap for him, please.
Your Excellency, President William Ruto, Honorable Cabinet Ministers, AMFI principals and colleagues, development partners, investors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Across history, nations that transform their destiny do so at moments when leadership chooses to build the future rather than wait for it. Today is one of those moments. Your Excellency, let me therefore begin by congratulating you, the government of Kenya, and the people of Kenya on the signing into law of the Kenya Infrastructure Fund. Moments like this matter because they signal something deeper beginning to take shape across Africa. For too long, Africa's development has often been spoken about as something that will happen someday, when conditions are right, when foreign direct investment improves, or when the world suddenly becomes fairer or turns attention to us. But history teaches us different. Nations do not develop because conditions are perfect. Nations develop because leaders make the deliberate decision to build. This is the significance of today. Today is not simply about a new fund. It is about a decision by Africans taking ownership of our development agenda, a decision to move from aspiration to execution, a decision to intentionally build the future deliberately. Because Africa's progress will ultimately not be written in declarations or headlines. It will be written through our institutions, our capital, and our execution. And that is precisely what today represents. The Kenya Infrastructure Fund, a decision to move from conversation to execution, to construction, from potential to prosperity. This initiative aligns closely with what we at the Africa Finance Corporation describe as the Build Africa framework. A simple but powerful idea. Africa will rise when African capital builds African infrastructure that powers African industry. The Kenya Infrastructure Fund embodies this philosophy. It mobilizes domestic capital, it channels that capital into strategic infrastructure, and it creates the conditions for industry and value creation to happen here in Kenya. Your Excellency, the ambition of this initiative to catalyze up to 40 billion in infrastructure investments over the coming decade is not only bold, it reminds us of a fundamental truth. Africa is not a collection of small economies. Africa is the market. And this is precisely the vision behind the Compendium of Strategic Minerals that we launched recently, a tool to give life to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which Your Excellency has consistently championed. Because when Africa operates as a single economic space with integrated infrastructure, coordinated policies, and open regional trade, the scale of our market becomes transformational. When Africa begins to organize itself as a market, the world will no longer ask whether Africa is ready. The world will ask how it can participate. Now, consider what $40 billion of infrastructure investment really means. It means demand on an enormous scale. Millions of tons of steel, millions of tons of aluminum, thousands of kilometers of copper and aluminum cables, petrochemical inputs, cement, construction materials, machinery, engineering services, and logistics. Infrastructure, therefore, is not only about connectivity. Infrastructure is demand. Infrastructure is industry. Infrastructure is jobs. Jobs and more jobs. And once we recognize the scale of demand that we are creating with this infrastructure fund, the next question naturally follows. Where will this demand we have created be supplied from? Will the materials required to build Kenya's infrastructure continue to be processed elsewhere, only for us to import them back at higher cost? Because when that happens, we reinforce the dysfunctional extractive model we inherited, exporting our resources, freight on board, FOB, and importing them back, cost, insurance, and freight. In effect, exporting the jobs required to process our natural resources only to import inflation. That cannot be the future we accept. Instead, we must deliberately align three things. First, the demand created by infrastructure investments. Second, the infrastructure required to process resources efficiently, particularly power, bearing in mind Kenya's remarkable advantage in renewable and green energy, together with transport and logistics. And third, the resources themselves, here in Kenya and across the wider region. When these three come together, supported by regional coordination and policy certainty, infrastructure becomes more than connectivity. It becomes industrial policy in action. Your Excellency, perhaps the most powerful element of the Kenya Infrastructure Fund is its potential to mobilize Africa's domestic capital. Across our continent today, domestic capital pools across banks, insurance funds, pension funds, central bank reserves, public development bonds, is over $4.4 trillion. So, what this means is that Africa is not short of capital. What we have lacked is the organization of that capital. Consider Kenya. Kenya's pension industry and insurance industry manage over $30 billion in assets. I mean, Dr. Kili talked about it in trillions. in shillings. Allow me to talk about it in dollars because I'm not get used to the national currency, but I'll soon get used to it since I'm going to open up office here. Let me also use this moment to recognize the important role played by institutions such as CPF. Dr. Kili, whose leadership in mobilizing pension fund capital into AFC has been followed by other parts, like our friend Dr. David Koros of NSSF and several other pension funds that have invested in AFC, and with whom we will work with to ensure that we create the conditions for us to together support this significant milestone. And we'll support it by both working together as partners and also providing any credit enhancements that they require to mobilize even more funds to work with us. We have a couple of pilots that we have identified where we're working together to build or rehabilitate airports and some toll roads. So we have a huge pipeline we're going to work with, and we think that we would work with them to continue to see how we can support this initiative. So the question before us is simple. What proportion of these savings, the $4.4 trillion savings, the over $30 billion in Kenya, should help finance the infrastructure that will create jobs for the children of the workers whose savings we manage? Infrastructure funds like this provide the bridge between long-term savings and long-term national development. Because when domestic capital leads, international capital follows. This is how infrastructure ecosystems were built across Asia. The first world aspiration that we have, these are the structures that they put in place. So we need to replicate them if we're going to get there. And to unlock this at scale, standardization will be essential. Standardization in project development, in risk allocation, in governance frameworks. When infrastructure becomes a recognized and reliable asset class, pension funds can allocate capital with confidence. And institutions such as the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions here today stand ready to walk this journey alongside pension fund managers and governments across the continent. Your Excellency, next month, the Africa Finance Corporation will convene, together with the government of Kenya, the first Africa We Build Summit here in Nairobi, fittingly the home of our new regional headquarters. We're deeply grateful to you for agreeing to host this important gathering, and more importantly, for being a champion of the Africa we build. The purpose of that summit is simple: to mobilize Africa's own capital to build Africa's future. Because the challenge before Africa is not the absence of capital, it is the organization of that capital. The Africa We Build Summit will therefore bring together heads of governments, the African Union, ministers, cabinet secretaries, AMFI principals and delegates, development partners, investors and institutions, banks, around a shared objective: to mobilize Africa's domestic capital pools to finance the infrastructure and industries that will power the Africa we build. Because ultimately, the question before our generation is not whether Africa has the resources. We do have the resources. Africa has resources. It is not whether Africa has the capital. Africa has capital. The real question is whether we have the conviction to organize those resources to build the future we want. Today, Kenya has answered that question with clarity. And if we replicate this spirit across our continent, the story of Africa will change within a generation. Because the Africa our children will inherit will not be the Africa we hoped for. It will be the Africa we chose to build. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you at the Infrastructure Summit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, next we'll hear from Ms. Mary Porter, the Regional Vice President for International Finance Corporation. A warm clap as she approaches the stage. Karibu sana.
Your Excellency, President Ruto, honorable ministers, colleagues from government, fellow development finance institutions, and our partners in the banking sector, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and other institutional investors. On behalf of the World Bank Group and my own institution, the International Finance Corporation, it's a true pleasure to join you in celebrating the enactment of the National Infrastructure Fund Act. a milestone that signals fresh momentum in Kenya's journey to meet its infrastructure needs. Infrastructure is not simply roads or power plants, as you know. It's the platform that allows economies to function, encompassing transport, energy, digital connectivity, as well as the regulatory frameworks that sustain them. We see that where infrastructure works, industrialization accelerates, trade expands, and jobs are created. Experience from similar funds around the world show that clear objectives, strong and independent management, and openness in decision-making can build trust and attract investment toward initiatives that serve national priorities and benefit communities. IFC stands ready to walk alongside Kenya in this effort, sharing global expertise, connecting with investors, and supporting project preparation so that the NIF delivers infrastructure that's impactful, sustainable, and inclusive. Your Excellency, we look forward to deepening our engagement as Kenya mobilizes capital to build the infrastructure that will power the nation's growth for generations to come. Thank you, and again, a very big congratulations.
At this point, Your Excellency, allow me to invite CS Mbadi, CS for Treasury, to invite His Excellency, the President.
Distinguished delegates, kindly rise up and we put our hands together to welcome His Excellency the President, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya.
Thank you very much. Let's take our seats. I do not know whether to make my statement because it has already been made by so many of the speakers who have spoken here. But ladies and gentlemen, today is the 9th day of March 2026. I do not say this because I imagine you do not know what day it is. I say it because I want there to be no doubt about the significance of this moment. Years from now, we will look back on this day as a turning point in the journey of our nation's transformation. Today, I have signed into law the National Infrastructure Fund. For too long, Kenya has been a nation of great ambition without the financial resources to match it. We have known that what we must build, including roads, railways, ports, power, housing, and irrigation, yet too often, the means to achieve them remained beyond our reach. But Kenya has never been a nation defined by limitation. The generations before us fought for independence, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Because of them, we live under one of the most progressive, democratic, and open societies in the world. Our Constitution guarantees healthcare, housing, food, water, education, and social security as fundamental rights, but rights written on paper must be delivered in reality. That conviction gave rise to the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, the belief that our nationhood remains incomplete so long as millions are excluded from economic opportunity. Over the past 3 years, we have laid a stronger foundation for our country, restoring macroeconomic stability, revitalizing agriculture, expanding healthcare, stabilizing education, advancing affordable housing while creating jobs, increasing our savings, deepening financial inclusion, and opening new opportunities for our young people. Today, Kenya stands on firmer ground. But the next stage of our journey demands more. More skill, more investment, more infrastructure, and above all, a new way to finance our development. The National Infrastructure Fund is a commitment we made to the Kenyan people in our manifesto. Today, we fulfill that promise. But why did we propose the National Infrastructure Fund in the first place? Because of the scale of the challenge before us, there is need for a new approach. Multilateral development institutions estimate that Africa faces an infrastructure financing gap of up to $80 billion every year. That is, the continent requires about between 130 and 170 billion dollars for infrastructure development every year. Kenya and our infrastructure needs reflects that very reality. Every meeting, in every part of Kenya, the conversation is about this road and the other road. Electricity connection to this village and to that town. Connectivity in different parts of the country. And access to agricultural infrastructure for food security. Every meeting in every part of Kenya speaks to those issues. The World Bank has estimated that our country requires approximately $4 billion each year to meet its infrastructure needs. A decade ago, Africa, Kenya included, believed it had found a once-in-a-generation opportunity to accelerate infrastructure development. Global interest rates were historically low following the global financial crisis. The China's Belt and Road Initiative opened new sources of infrastructure financing. But we did not fully anticipate the risks of relying so heavily on sovereign debt. And certainly, none of us could have foreseen the shocks that would soon follow: the COVID-19 pandemic and the global economic and financial turbulence that came in its wake. It was against this backdrop that my team and I began to ask ourselves a necessary question before the last election. We spent a lot of time a year before the last election, and we asked ourselves, how would Kenya continue investing in the infrastructure required for our development, while at the same time stabilizing our economy, responding to all the other challenges that come with it, and navigating the aftershocks of pandemics? We knew that a period of fiscal discipline would be unavoidable, but we also knew that halting development was not an option. I remember this very clearly when I sat with David Ndii, who I'm sure is in our midst here, and Hassan, who is here, discussing how we are going to do things differently. That was 1 year before the last election. And we sat under a tree and we were discussing. They are much more knowledgeable than me in those matters. They schooled me in some of the items. But as Mbadi said, I am also a fast learner. That is where the idea of the National Infrastructure Fund was born. I couldn't put it much more clearly and succinctly than it is stated in our manifesto. And I want to quote for you. This is a manifesto written 4 years ago. An infrastructure fund, I quote, will be established with initial capitalization from privatization proceeds, with a view to progressively reducing financing of commercially viable infrastructure projects from the budget, end of quote. Today, we are doing exactly that. The National Infrastructure Fund is here, and tomorrow in the morning at 8, I will be at the NSC to ring the bell to complete the privatization of the Kenya Pipeline IPO and raise 106 billion Kenya shillings that will be the seed money for the National Infrastructure Fund. It looks too exact to be real, but that is what it is. We would have moved earlier, but as many of you know, our privatization initiatives encountered some headwinds. Around the same time, we sought to expand, for example, the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport through a public-private partnership. That proposal also met very strong resistance. Today, I am pleased to announce that the expansion of the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport will be the first major project financed through this new model of financing under the National Infrastructure Fund. Just so that you know, and again, it looks too exact to be real, we just announced the contract for the expansion of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Between 15 and 20 billion shillings from the National Infrastructure Fund, from the proceeds of the Kenya Pipeline IPO, will go to financing the seed money for the expansion of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. We will put in our 15 or 20 billion, pension funds, insurance companies, other collectives. You have the opportunity to invest. We are not talking about next year. We are not talking about in August. The opportunity to work with us in the National Infrastructure Fund is as soon as next month. So the opportunities you have been looking for to invest in commercially viable public infrastructure projects is right here. And our skin as government will be the first one in the game. You will come, and then others will come. As Kili said, this is one of the things they told me when I first appeared at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. It's taken a bit of time, Mr. Kili, but now we are here. See you in the game. The potential for domestic capital is immense. You've just heard the numbers. We have 2.81 trillion of Kenyan money that is available from our pensions and our other collectives. This is money, patient money, that can be used for our national development. Pension money is for pensioners, but pensioners have children. We've been told here by my good friend, the CEO of Africa Finance Corporation, we must use pensions to create jobs for the children of those whose pensions we are managing. That's what he told us. You know, that money must work for the pensioners. It must work for their children. And we now have the structure. We now have the plan to make sure that we channel those resources in the right direction. Make sure that it earns a returns for the pensioners, but also supports our national development. Last year alone, Kenyan pension funds assets grew by 700 billion shillings, representing a 25% increase, bringing total pension assets to 2.81 trillion. In 2023, as Kili said, it was 1.6 trillion. Look at the growth. It's growing by 700 billion every year. It will not be possible for you to invest that money in treasury bills or treasury bonds. We have to look for new asset classes for us. And I want to ask the people in that space to begin to think about new asset classes and to eliminate restrictions that are put on pension money to invest in other asset classes that gives a return, but also helps grow the nation and grow the economy. The annual growth of 700 billion shillings, equivalent to roughly $5.3 billion, exceeds the World Bank's estimate of our total annual infrastructure financing requirement. The National Infrastructure Fund provides a mechanism to channel these long-term savings directly into infrastructure investments. Mobilizing domestic capital will help us solve three major challenges that arise when development depends excessively on foreign financing. The first challenge it will help us solve is the mismatch of investment horizon. Infrastructure projects are long-term assets. Whether you talk about highways, toll roads, energy, and rail, these are long-term infrastructure. They are viable. They are commercially viable, but their gestation period is longer. Look at what we did with the SGR. We took facilities of 15 years and 20 years. That is why it almost crushed us. Now we have an opportunity to, under the National Infrastructure Fund, to crowd in resources with a long-term view and make those infrastructure projects work for the people investing and for the nation, and make them commercially viable. The second issue that this will help us solve is the cost of capital. Many analysts have shown that Africa consistently pays more for capital than objective risk would justify. In infrastructure financing, the default rate in Africa is approximately 5.5%, compared to 14.5% in Latin America. But you know what? International investors typically demand returns that are about 5 percentage points higher in Africa than in Latin America. Just look at the unfairness. Our default rate is 5.5%. In Latin America, it is 14.5%. Yet, when we go to the market, we are told we are much more risky investment destination than Latin America. Where is the sense? Where is the fairness? And that is precisely what this National Infrastructure Fund is going to solve. This perception bias alone is estimated to cost the continent up to $4 billion each year in additional interest payments. Payments we shouldn't be making. If we apply Kenya's share of Africa's Eurobond exposure, roughly 8%. That perception penalty costs us approximately $320 million every year. That is 42 billion shillings every year that we are paying more than we should be paying merely because we have a perception penalty. The National Infrastructure Fund will erase that perception penalty because we will be mobilizing our resources from here. And nobody is going to tell us about a risk that does not crystallize. The third challenge is currency mismatch. When infrastructure is financed in foreign currency while the revenues are earned in Kenya shillings, exchange rate volatility introduces significant risk. This challenge has long affected many of our utilities. Many of you remember the challenges Kenya Power goes through all the time. Domestic financing helps eliminate this currency exposure. As I said, tomorrow morning, I will ring the bell to inaugurate trading of the Kenya pipeline on the Nairobi Securities Exchange, fulfilling a commitment I made 3 years ago. Kenya Pipeline Company IPO has generated 106 billion shillings that will be used to capitalize the National Infrastructure Fund. Our goal is to leverage this capital at least 12 times, mobilizing up to 1.2 trillion shillings for infrastructure investment. Over time, this model will enable Kenya to mobilize close to 5 trillion shillings in infrastructure investments over the next decade. And that is why all of us are talking about over the next generation. Previously, this asset would have provided the National Treasury with a dividend of about 5 billion shillings annually. That's exactly what John Mbadi was saying. This asset of Kenya Pipeline, we would be receiving a dividend of 5 billion shillings every year. But look at what it is going to do. The maximization of this mature asset is going to do maybe 20, 30 times what the 5 billion shillings would do for us every year. And that is the genius in rearranging and reorganizing our resources in a manner that it works best and we maximize their output and benefit and create much more impact than it currently is creating. Through the National Infrastructure Fund, that value of 5 billion will now be multiplied many times over, delivering infrastructure that will benefit all the people of Kenya. I must confess that I struggle to understand the argument that using infrastructure assets to finance additional infrastructure somehow amounts to selling the family silver. I don't understand how that logic is. On the contrary, it is the responsible stewardship of national assets for national development. Many of you will also be aware that Parliament recently enacted the Government-Owned Enterprises Act. This legislation provides modern legal framework for commercializing government enterprises and ensuring that they operate according to the highest standard of corporate governance. This is what our friends from the banks were telling us. I want to assure you that the National Infrastructure Fund and all the other government-owned enterprises, we have made a decision that these assets will be, these parastatals and government agencies will be run on the same principles as the private sector, if not higher. That is our commitment. We have made the decision that these commercially viable agencies and enterprises will not be run by people with political connection. They will not be run by politicians who have not succeeded in their quest. They will not be run by people who have not been subjected to competitive recruitment. This is how we are going to change how Kenya delivers on the most critical and priority programs. This legislation provides a modern, as I said, framework for us to work with the private sector. Institutions such as the Kenya Airports Authority, Kenya Ports Authority, Kenya Railways, KETRACO, the Geothermal Development Company, the National Cereals and Produce Board will now operate under this framework, among others. Over time, these entities will access capital markets, and the proceeds will allow us to build even more infrastructure for the future. The law establishing the National Infrastructure Fund also provides strong governance safeguards. It establishes a governing council responsible for strategic oversight, strengthens the professionalism and independence of the fund's board, and ensures parliamentary oversight in its investment policy to guarantee transparency, accountability, and the prudent stewardship of public resources. Finally, let me emphasize that the National Infrastructure Fund is not an experiment. It is a model that has been adopted successfully around the world. Examples include the Nigeria Infrastructure Fund established in 2011, the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund in 2014, India's National Investment and Infrastructure Fund in 2015, the Canada Infrastructure Bank in 2017, the United Kingdom's National Wealth Fund, and the South Africa's Infrastructure Fund. We have drawn lessons from all these experiences. I remember we sat down here with many of the people who have developed these funds. IFC was on the table with us. I have had conversations with my good friend Tadesse on this, and Tadesse, 2.5 years ago, encouraged me, Mr. President, think about owning your own horse. And the horse he was talking about is the National Infrastructure Fund. Thank you very much, Tadesse, for your insight. You know, he's a pastoralist, so the horse. I want to thank our development finance partners, including the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation represented here today, who have supported us in designing this framework. The statute we have signed today specifically allows the National Infrastructure Fund to leverage the technical expertise of development finance institutions, of which Kenya is a member. The National Infrastructure Fund will help us, number one, prioritize what is important to us. Number one. Number two, structure our priorities and make them or package them into investable instruments. That capacity, as was said by our banks here, the banks will come in, our DFIs will come in, so that together we can build the capacity to be able to structure what is priority for Kenya into investable instruments. And number three, we will be the first in. We have the resources to either de-risk or to participate in making sure that other investors see us in the equation rather than us encouraging them to be in the equation. Indeed, I must acknowledge that without the responsiveness of our regional and global partners, including the Trade and Development Bank, Afri-Exim Bank, the Africa Finance Corporation, the Africa Development Bank, the World Bank, Kenya would have faced far greater difficulty navigating the global financial turbulence of the last 2 years of my administration. And these good people have been friends to us. We've had very difficult conversations sometimes, but we have been candid and we've been open in our conversations. This development of today is so consequential that when I asked my friend, the CEO of AFC, almost 4 days ago, that we are going to have this event, he canceled his travel and waited because he said he must speak on this occasion because it is a most consequential occasion, not just for Kenya, but for the continent. And you have heard his statement. He has said with clarity that we must build the future rather than wait for that future. The National Infrastructure Fund gives us the opportunity to build the future rather than wait for it. He has said another fundamental statement because I was listening very carefully. He said, for a very long time, we have been exporting our jobs FOB and importing inflation CFI. Did you listen? So it is time to change that. And this is the opportunity, working together for us to change that. And I will, with a lot of pride, work with you on your theme of Africa we build. We will be there because we want, this is our continent we must build. At a very personal level, I have been building. Yes. From right here in State House, this structure you see here, I built it. And you can see there is construction going on. And it's not just going on in State House. It is going on in markets. It's going on in hostels. It is going on in housing projects. It's going on in the roads. It's going on everywhere. We are building Kenya, and we will work with you to build Africa. Because that is what it is. That is how we are going to transform our nations. I also wish to thank the people of Kenya and Parliament for their support in passing the National Infrastructure Bill. Through public participation, thousands of Kenyans contributed ideas that helped strengthen the governance and transparency provisions contained in the final act. In approving this legislation, Parliament has once again demonstrated foresight, responsibility, and a shared commitment to strengthen the long-term foundation of our country's growth and prosperity. Let me single out the Leader of Majority and the Chair and Committee of Parliament on Finance. Please, if they can rise up so that we can applaud them. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. When I finally write my book, you will have a special chapter. Because what we are doing today is very, very consequential to the development of our great nation. Today's moment, therefore, represents more than a creation of a fund. It represents a new chapter in how Kenya finances its future. A chapter where we invest at scale in the foundation of a first world economy, transforming agriculture through extensive irrigation and water infrastructure, expanding modern infrastructure, including roads, rail, ports, airports, and logistic corridors that connect our farms, factories, and markets, and scaling up reliable energy to power industry, innovation, and value-added production across our economy. A chapter where our ambition is matched by our capacity. A chapter where the savings of Kenyans today build the infrastructure of Kenya's tomorrow. And a chapter where development is not postponed for tomorrow, but financed confidently today. Let me conclude by saying today is a most important day for me. You know, when I see us moving from the discussions we've been having, when I listen to what the private sector is doing, and I want to associate myself with what the banks have said. You know, when we asked our local banks, when we had a crisis of fuel in Kenya, we didn't have oil products in Kenya because we had serious shortages. And we asked banks to step in so that we can create a G2G framework. Some banks were shy, understandably so, but some stepped up. Today, I am very proud of the contribution of Kenya Commercial Bank. In fact, they endured a lot of ridicule. They were told that they were so much in bed with government, they would suffer many consequences. But look at what has happened. The share of KCB at the Nairobi Securities Exchange has moved from, what was it in 17, 18, 20, what? 15 shillings in 2023, today is close to 80. That is what happens when you work with government in a structured manner. And friends, we are not mad and we are not fools. We know what we are doing. And we want to do it with you. We want to work with you. I am very happy that many of our banks now believe in what we are doing, and many of them are stepping forward. I want to encourage you that we will be prudent, we will be responsible, we will be transparent as well. And we want to have a candid conversation with our financial institutions because we must together be prudent in the management of the resources of our nation. We don't have a nation that belongs to the private sector, neither do we have one that belongs to the public sector. We are one, and therefore we will work together. Let me say one more thing. Lindsay Capital worked with us in raising resources for the building of Talanta, one of our very big stadia that will host AFCON next year. I saw a gentleman say that, you know, William Ruto and the government, they have already pledged for 15 years money from our resources to build Talanta. Yes, we have. That's correct. That's what we have done. But I want to ask the question. The last 15 years, what has that fund done? Do you have anything that you can see that that fund has done for the last 15 years? Nothing. Cabro here, a gate there, some other money stolen at the corner, others appropriated at another place. We are better off pledging 15 years when we can see a facility like Talanta Center standing, because then there will be no money to be stolen, and there will be no money to be appropriated or to be misappropriated, because the money will be locked up in an asset that we can see. That's the whole difference. So if you are complaining that we have pledged money for 15 years to build Talanta, before you make that statement, tell us what that money has done the last 15 years. At least we can show that we have an asset that we can begin to use today. And we can monetize it today. That's how we are going to be innovative. That's how we are going to change our country. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I am carried away. So forgive me if I have spoken more than I should, but I am very happy that we're all sitting here as Kenyans, and we are thinking about how we can synergize, we can bring the private sector, we can bring the public sector to be able to grow our economy, develop our country, because that way we not only create jobs for our children, but we develop our country that will benefit, and when the economy expands, it's good for everybody. It's good for the private sector, it's good for the public sector, it's good for Kenya. I want to pledge and commit to you that whatever it takes, I will continue to lead from the front. Whatever the consequences, I will continue to lead from the front. Because you don't get the opportunity to be president anytime. It's a privilege and a great honor. And while I have it, I will do the best that I can, because it is high privilege to lead a nation. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for coming for this occasion. Sasa kazi inaanza tomorrow morning tukisonga mbele. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. May I request, Your Excellency, for you to just remain on stage for one photo, just one photo to immortalize this day. The Finance Committee members, if we can make way to the front. Let's take our seats, please, the rest of us, for just a minute. Just one photo that will remind us of this day. The Finance Committee members who are present to have this day, as it is a momentous occasion, one that goes into the annals of history. After the photo, we'll then rise for our closing prayer, which is the national anthem. And all smiles as we remember this day. Even you who are not in the photo can smile. It's a wonderful day. Thank you, Your Excellency. I'll request. Let's also have those on the presidential table to join His Excellency for a photo. Governor, Central Bank can also join. Also, Waziri Davis. I think we also have two other Waziris, kindly, if we can have the Waziris who are present. All right, the last photo, Your Excellency, banks and insurance representatives. We have the banks and insurance representatives and pension fund as well. Okay, we are quite a number. So let's start with banks. Let's do the banks alone. Banks on their own, then insurance and pension funds together. Then our last one, insurance and pension funds, kindly. Pension funds first, pension funds. Pension funds to begin. Insurance. Insurance. Thank you, Your Excellency. We'll request that all exit the stage except His Excellency as we all rise for the national anthem, which is our closing prayer. Let us all rise for the anthem. The anthem.